Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirame Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we continue now with the discussion on how to put our understanding of non-duality into practice. As we saw, it's not enough to merely be able to appreciate the idea intellectually, but also how to live day to day according to this. Because transformation of consciousness, transformation of our personality will occur only through practice. It will not occur merely through appreciating a good idea or understanding a good idea, but actually living. And by living, I mean there are at least three main things in our living experience. The first is thinking, how the mind thinks. The second is how we express our thinking through our words. And words is also a vehicle through which most of our communication occurs. Whether those words are spoken or written, that's how we remain in contact with others. And then finally, through our actions. So thoughts, words, and actions. How will I know that something is really changing within me? It's not just a question of a passing mood, but something that is really changing when I find that the way my mind thinks now is different from the way it thought 6 months ago or a year ago. The way I express my understanding, the way I relate myself with the people and things around me is different from what it was before. Similarly, the way I do my actions, my relationship with my work is different from how it was. And then when that kind of a difference, which may not be noticeable on a day-to-day basis, but if we kind of take a longer chunks of time, 6 months ago, a year ago, or 5 years ago, so think about how we were 5 years ago and how we are now, and ask ourselves, am I a better person now, or was I a better person then? That is a better way to judge which direction our life is going. Sometimes those people who have a habit of keeping a diary or keeping a journal sometimes find this helpful. Not journal simply in terms of what you have done that day, but whatever thoughts are going on in your mind. Not everyone has the habit, and it's not that everyone should have it, but those who have that habit, and then if you go back into your diary or journal and say, oh, what kind of thoughts were going on in my mind 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And you know what kind of thoughts are going on in my mind now. What are the kind of things I tend to think more often? What is the dominant characteristic of my mind? So those are the ways we are able to judge whether we are becoming better or we are becoming worse. And that's essentially what really matters in spiritual life. So verse 266. Buddhau guhayam sarasatvilakshanam brahmasti satyam paramadvitiyam tadatmanayotra vaset guhayam punarnatasyanga guha praveshaha. Brahman, who is distinct from the gross and the subtle, real, supreme, and without a second, is in the cave of the heart. One who dwells in the cave of the body with the awareness of being Brahman does not enter the cave of the body again. So the first section of this verse deals with the different characteristics of Brahman, which we have seen many times before. One who is distinct from the gross and the subtle. Now, these words are often used in Vedanta texts. The difference between gross and the subtle is sometimes described as that between that which is manifest and that which is not manifest. Both are material, but if the matter is very subtle, then it's not immediately grasped by our senses. And that which is gross is clearly grasped by our senses. So whether it is gross or subtle, Brahman is distinct from both. So sometimes people might think, oh, Brahman is very subtle and the rest of the universe is gross. So here what they do is, no, in material universe itself, we can make the distinction between gross and subtle. And Brahman transcends both the gross and the subtle. Real, which also means is eternal, supreme, because there is no other, and without a second, is in the cave of the heart. Now this is something that comes up again and again as well, the imagery of the cave. Now, I'm sure we are familiar with the cave. Some of us may have visited some cave. There is a in Carlsbad in New Mexico, there are these caverns deep inside, almost like I think probably 800 or 1,000 feet underground. And it's a fascinating experience if you've never been there. Yeah, it's completely pitch dark and completely silence. You go about 1,000, probably I think it's around 1,000 or more feet underground. And yeah, it's so anyway, we may have visited some caves, and we know a cave essentially is a place which is dark, which is hidden. When you're inside, you can't see, and depending on how deep the cave is. And therefore, the presence of the divine in our heart is sometimes compared to something that is dwelling inside a cave. And that's what every meditator experiences, at least in the beginning. That when we try to close our eyes and think of God, in the beginning, everyone sees just darkness. And that's exactly the kind of experience one might have when one is in a cave. And so this imagery of the cave appears again and again, not only in mythology, but also in the Upanishads. The word heart comes again and again also, the cave of the heart. Now, the heart, of course, the first thing most of us might think is about the anatomical heart, the biological heart. And when we are told to meditate on the divine in the heart, it's clearly not the biological heart. There is hardly any place there. It's too tiny, filled with blood, no place for God to sit at. Well, we don't, at least we wouldn't like to. We can't think of God sitting inside a physical heart. But we use the word heart. So we know that the word heart can be used in more than one sense. So besides the physiological heart, we also see the heart as the seat of emotions. That's why even in literature, people speak out with a heavy heart. And sometimes when we are overwhelmed by emotions, we feel there's a kind of a strange feeling here. People feel, sometimes people touch their heart and speak. And we know that that's often seen as a kind of sign that someone is really sincere when they touch their heart. So the heart, besides doing the pumping of the blood and all of that, is also a seat of emotions. So there is this emotional heart. Now, beyond the physiological heart and the emotional heart, there is also the spiritual heart. So in effect, there are three hearts. And if you want to think it, maybe you could think of the physiological heart as the gross heart, which can be, well, none of us has seen our whole own heart, but we know it's there. Sometimes even people speak about some people like this, a heartless person. But again, what we really mean is not the physiological heart, otherwise that person wouldn't be there. So it's that person bereft of any feelings or emotion, we just say heartless. So when we are asked to meditate in the heart, it's neither the physiological heart nor the emotional heart, but the spiritual heart. And the reason we in the beginning see only darkness is because we haven't located that spiritual heart yet. All that we know is that it is in this area. All the three hearts are in this area. That's for sure. It's a little bit like someone, the example I often give, if someone has not come to the center, the Vedanta center, then someone says, oh, you know, it's in Kenmore Square. So when they come for the first time, they know the general area in which the center is located. But after reaching Kenmore Square, they have to kind of search for it. And there are all these one-way streets. And sometimes people, especially coming from out of the town, kind of sometimes get confused by which turns to take and so on. But ultimately, then they find the center. In the same way, we know that the spiritual heart is in this area. But then we need to kind of explore a little further to be able to find that heart. And oftentimes, the discovery of that heart is often considered the first genuine spiritual experience in life. Once we are able to locate that heart, and then when we are trying to visualize the form of our Ishta, chosen deity there, we succeed in a better way. The image of the deity becomes more stable. Because it has a definite location. We know where we are seeing, what we are seeing. And so this Brahman is in the cave of the heart. So it's also one other small footnote to this. Sometimes it may so happen that people, when they try to meditate, try to pray, people sometimes may become very emotional when they do so. And that is often a sign that the emotional heart has gotten activated. And that's why our connection gets expressed through these strong feelings and strong emotions. Although we read in books, in the lives of great saints and so on, how when they think of God, tears come from their eyes and the different emotional expressions we see in their lives. So we have to guard a little bit about this, that if we get too emotional while we are praying or meditating, do not immediately jump to the conclusion that, oh, I'm become a big saint or something, which it might be true, but it also will be true that maybe my emotional heart has gotten activated. In general, it's a good practice to try to control one's emotions while praying and meditating. And in spite of your best effort, if it still overflows, then that's a different matter. But not to kind of encourage oneself in getting very emotional while meditating, because it doesn't help. So what we want is to go beyond even the emotional heart to reach that spiritual heart, because that is where Brahman, that is where the divine is located. Now in this particular verse, the word cave comes more than once, and the second time it comes, it's really referring to the body. And that's an important thing to remember, that a lot of these terms are not some kind of technical terms. In other words, every time you see the word cave in any Vedanta text, don't immediately jump to the conclusion, oh, that means this great spiritual heart. Sometimes it could be just a cave, just a regular cave. So we have to see the context in which certain things are said. And therefore, you find in the second half of the verse, one who dwells in the cave of the body, that is really, this body itself can be seen as a cave, and then a dwelling place. And we are inside this body, with the awareness of being Brahman, does not enter the cave of the body again. So being born, birth, can be seen as entering the cave of the body, and death would mean leaving this cave of the body. And we know that as long as I'm in ignorance, I do not know my true identity, as long as I am living under a false identity, or I am mistaking the body and the mind to be who I am, then I will continue to enter into the cave of the body again and again, remaining in this cycle of birth and death. And that's essentially what rebirth means. Now, moksha or freedom means never having to be born again. Never having to come back into this mortal body and kind of go through this endless cycle of birth and death. Birth, growth, aging, sickness, death. And then be born again and go through the whole cycle again. But in order for me to not have to come back again, I need to live with the awareness of being Brahman. Now that's what we try to do at the time of meditation. Not necessarily exactly in those terms, depending on whatever is the nature of our practice. It's to transcend our present material identity, an identity which is tied to the body and mind. And one way of doing that is cultivating the awareness which is connected with God. Ramakrishna called it the ripe eye. So when we pray, when we meditate, when we worship, with the idea that I'm a child of God, I'm a child of the Holy Mother, or I'm a servant of God, I'm trying to leave behind my material identity and acquire this spiritual identity which is closer to my true identity. Now, to the extent I succeed in doing that, I'm loosening the hold of these. It's like this. Sometimes, let's say, if a person is, say, kidnapped or something, and then the captors hide this person in a basement, and they tie up this person hands and feet on a chair and with a rope, and then maybe they have contacted the family for ransom. If you are an imaginative mind, you can kind of think of all these scenarios. And then this person is now tied. Now, if this person wants to be free. Now, in order to be free, first thing to do would be somehow to see if you can loosen the hold of the rope. If you try to something, it kind of wiggle your hands and feet and try to see if there is some room to move. And if I can succeed in loosening the hold a little bit, I have a better chance of removing the knots or getting out of somehow. And so that's what essentially we try to do. We may not succeed in remembering every moment of our lives right now, of our ripe eye, of our identity as Brahman, identity as the Atman, identity as a child of God, as a child of Mother. But even during those few minutes that we are meditating, if I can try to remember that, hold on to that identity, then even though the rest of the time I'm still connected with the body and mind, my attachment to the body and mind becomes a little slightly less. It's very, very, very gradual process. But the more I try to intensify my spiritual identity, not then after some time limiting it only when I'm meditating, but try to remember it even after my meditation ends. Try to find creative ways of being reminded of my identity as often as possible throughout the day. Then I succeed gradually in letting go of these earlier identity and acquiring this new identity. It's hard work. It just doesn't happen by itself. We have to struggle, we have to hard. We may experience a lot of setbacks. And there are people who try for some time and give up and say, no, this is just too much. Maybe I'll try next life or something. But a real hero, a real soldier, a person who wants to succeed will not give up and says, no matter how often I fail, I'm going to get up and start marching. When that person is able to do that and gradually you remain in that awareness all through the day, then such a person does not enter the cave of the body again. Now, the one question that can come is, well, if this person could enter the cave of the body once, why not again? If I am born once because of my delusion, and now I get knowledge, and I think I am free, but the fact that I was deluded once opens up the possibility that I could be deluded again, which is true. If it can happen once, it can happen again. I mean, that would be a scientific attitude towards anything. If it can happen once, it can happen again. And so the Vedantic position is, it has not happened even once. So yes, right now, we are in the cave of the body. When we get the supreme knowledge, we're going to be free and never have to be reborn again. Reborn again actually is not the right term. Born again or reborn. That's kind of a tautology. What Vedanta says is that once I become free, I will know that I was never bound at all. And that's why we speak about the dream. So that, let's say, in my dream, I find that I'm imprisoned. And of course I want to become free, but I'm in a prison. And then I wake up in the morning and I find I'm free. Then I say, oh, I won't say then, I will never get into the prison again, because I was never there in the prison in the first place, because it was just a dream. So that's to be kept at the back of the mind. When it is said that a person will not be born again, that does not imply that the person was born once. It simply means even when we thought we were born, that was only a mental projection. It's like saying, going back to our the rope and snake, where we kind of so go to that rope and snake so frequently. It's like saying, once you mistake a rope for a snake, you switch on the light, you find that it's a rope. And then you can say, oh, this rope will never become the snake again. What do you mean not? It never became snake even once, even the first time. So that's what it meant saying this person will not be born again. Verse 267. 367. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. 267. Jnate vastunyapi balavati vasananadiresha karta bhokta pyahamiti dridha yasya samsara hetuhu pratyak drishtyatmani nivasata sapaneya prayatnat yuktim prahustadiha munayo vasanatana vamyate. Even after knowing the Atman, there remains the strong, sturdy, and timeless tendency to think of oneself as the doer and the experiencer, which causes rebirth. Effort should be made to destroy this tendency by remaining continually identified with the Atman. The dissolution of this tendency is spiritual freedom here and now, so say the wise. This is important. It begins by saying, even after knowing the Atman. But knowing the Atman means, even after knowing that I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am the Atman, even after that, I might still occasionally think of myself as the body and mind. And the reason for that is the samskara, the impression, because for years and years and years, not only in this life, in all of my previous lives, I've looked upon this body and mind as me. So just think about the millions and trillions of mental impressions within me that I am this body and mind. And now, suddenly I have got this realization, I am the Atman. And there is a temptation to immediately think, once I know I'm the Atman, it's done. It's like once I wake up, the problem is solved. Yes, the problem is solved. But sometimes you might see that, I'm sure it may have happened in the lives of all of us. Sometimes we are in deep sleep, we had a good sleep, maybe we saw a lot of nice dreams, and then we kind of wake up in the morning, and especially if it's like getting cold like this, and you're nice cozy in a warm blanket, and then you kind of just snooze your alarm and say, okay, let me just sleep for a little bit more. It's so cold outside and it just feels warm and nice now. And then we go to sleep again and maybe see another dream. So we woke up, but it's also possible to kind of glide back into sleep again. Or sometimes we might also experience that maybe you're seeing some terrifying dream. Maybe a tiger or a bear or a grizzly bear were chasing you in your dream. And you're like running for your life. And then suddenly you wake up. Now sometimes it's like a really terrifying dream. You might feel your heart is beating a bit faster. Now, the terrifying event was in the dream. And yet, we find that even after waking up, we kind of carry over the emotions of that dream and gets manifested in this body. And so, because our samskara of thinking myself as the doer and the experiencer, the karta and the bhokta, that impression is so strong that it might come even after I know I am the Atman. And therefore, it says, effort should be made to destroy this tendency by remaining continually identified with the Atman. So even when we have a slight glimpse that, oh, I am the Atman, or you might have a slight glimpse, maybe you are able to feel the presence of your chosen deity. And that's good, that's so energizing, that's so, it just fills our heart with joy. But just because I've had that glimpse, I should not then say, oh, I am now an enlightened being. Well, if you read these Vedanta blogs, you can see something like that happened to Narada. He had a glimpse into something transcendent, and then he thought, wow, now I am the most supreme being. We have to guard ourselves against that. Yes, if we do our practice with sincerity, with faith, with regularity, glimpses will come. And they are good. They are a sign that we are on the right track. But as soon as that glimpse comes, the mind can also revert back to the original thing. Sometimes the example they give in books is that of if you see a pond, a tiny little pond with water, and because the water has been stagnant, there is no movement. Sometimes you will see a greenish moss would have come on the surface of that water. And then, actually the water is pretty good. You just go with your hand and clear the water a little bit, and you find wonderful water underneath. Now, as soon as you move that moss away, you are able to see the transparent water underneath. But then you kind of back off a little bit, wait for a few minutes, gradually you will find it just comes and covers up the thing again. That's something like that happens in our heart. Even when we have these glimpses, I think, which was that poet who called it the, I think, intimations of immortality or something like that. So when we get these glimpses, it's almost like for a short time, the covering, the layer of moss on our heart kind of parts a little bit, and you get this light of the Atman shining forth. But once again, it just covers it up. And then you're like, oh, I had such wonderful experience and it's gone now. Oftentimes in the beginning, the experience itself will last for a very short time, but it leaves behind a very deep impression. And that impression supports us, helps us, because then we know that there is a deeper reality. It's not simply a matter of faith, it's actually a matter of direct perception. It's a matter of direct experience. Yes, the door may have closed again, but we have had a glimpse of some deeper truth and reality here. And then there is a hunger, there is the intensity of trying harder yet so that the door will open once again. So that's why it is said, effort should be made to destroy this tendency by remaining continually identified. And that's important, continually. In the beginning, it may have these gaps, but over time, we have to kind of bridge those gaps so that the mind remains at that level all the time. And when that tendency is completely dissolved, then we have the spiritual freedom right here. Then we can say that we have become completely enlightened. So glimpses are a good guideposts on the way. Glimpses are a good sign that we are on the right track. So if you have made a resolution to wake up in the morning, early in the morning, and do your meditation, and then next time your alarm goes and you are tempted to snooze it and go to sleep again, remember this verse and say, no, it's not enough to simply wake up. Wake up and get out of your bed. And then the chances of you going back to the bed are still there, but relatively less, I think. Verse 268. Aham mameti yo bhavo dehakshadau anatmani adhyasoyam nirastavyo vidusha svatmanishtaya. The identification with non-self entities like the body and the senses as I and mine is due to superimposition on the Atman. It must be destroyed by the wise disciple by remaining identified with the Atman. Remaining identified means something that we have seen often. It means there is no holiday in spiritual life. Yes, it's good to have weekends and good to have work days and rest days. But to a serious spiritual seeker, spiritual practice is the rest. You see, that's the one important change we hope to have in our own lives. How often or how long should I think of my japa, my meditation, as one more chore to be completed in the course of the day, as work, as something that takes my time, will need to expend some energy, it needs some effort, it's something because of which I'm not able to do my other work, but it's one of the things I need to do. Because that's how we think of work, something that needs to be done. Oftentimes we don't think of our rest that way. Rest is something that, oh, that energizes me. This makes me feel better, stronger, fresher. And I think one sign that we are on the right track would be when I start looking upon my spiritual practice as rest rather than work. Now, some people actually make it more literally. The moment they try to sit for meditation, they fall asleep. And that kind of becomes a rest. But I'm not speaking rest in that point. That remaining fully vigilant, fully alert during our prayer and during our meditation. And if we can remain that way, a good meditation, a good prayer is extremely restful. Swami Vivekananda says about meditation, he says that at present for most people, the best rest we get in the course of a day is when we are fast asleep. Yes, sleeping is more rest than remaining awake and working. But even in sleep, the mind still remains active. Even when we are asleep and when we are dreaming, mind is very active. It's actually just, a dream is a movie in which the producer, director and actor and all the props and everything in that movie is really the mind. The mind is playing all those roles. So the mind is very active during dreams. And so we are not really getting complete rest even when we are asleep. The only time we get good rest is during that time of dreamless sleep, which we say sushupti. That is the time the body is at rest. Thankfully, not fully at rest because the heart is still beating and all those things are going on. And we want that minimal activity to be occurring, otherwise we won't wake up. But the body is at rest, the mind is at rest, mostly. Just like the body is mostly at rest, the mind is mostly at rest. So that is the level of deep rest we can see in that state of deep sleep. Swami Vivekananda says that in a good meditation, and the word good here is important, it's not enough to just sit with closed eyes and think, oh, I'm meditating now, because we're just sitting with closed eyes. But that itself may not become meditation. But in a good meditation, we will see that we feel rested. At the end of a good meditation, we will feel more energized. People have experienced that after good meditation, when they get up from their seat, the body feels lighter. You don't feel heavier. The sign of heaviness in the body is a sign of tamasika state. But when that sattva is predominant, and that happens at the end of a good meditation, we'll feel, even physically, we will feel lighter. That's what the yogis say. And so that is what is being referred to here. That the identification with the non-self entities like the body and the senses as I and mine, is due to superimposition. It must be destroyed by the wise disciple by remaining identified with the Atman. So that remaining identified can help remove this tamasika state. Being attached to any material entity is a sign of tamas. And therefore, we need to transform eventually our whole living experience should not be different from our meditation experience. Right now, meditation is one of the many things we do in life. When we do meditation, we simultaneously cannot do other things because that's a time, and that's good. That's a good practice. But just as when we take a shot, I mean, even when we got vaccines, all of us have had vaccines during this COVID, and even you get flu shots and stuff like that. Now, it's given at one part of the body, oftentimes in the upper arm. Now, even though the shots are given in just one part of the body, we can't say, oh, only this part now is protected against COVID. No, then you will have to be given shots all over the body if I want to protect the whole body. So just as the shot is given at only one place, but the effect of that is felt all over the body. The entire body gets protected. Think about your meditation in the morning and evening as two shots given in this 24-hour body of our life. So the benefit of those two shots given, one in the morning, one in the evening, should not be only for the time I'm meditating. That benefit must spread across this entire 24 hours. And therefore, oftentimes teachers advise their students that immediately after meditation, don't immediately throw yourself into some hectic activity. It's kind of gradually, you kind of get up slowly from your meditation cushion. If possible, just even if it's for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes, do some reading, move slowly, maybe fix yourself a nice cup of tea or coffee. And then, of course, eventually you're going to get into hectic activity anyway. But do it in a way by which whatever measure of calmness and joy and quietness we might experience at the time of meditation should not end immediately after I get up. It should somehow continue a little bit longer. Eventually, it's going to dissipate and you're going to get hectic or phone calls and this and that. And so try to find the moments of quietness even when you are extremely busy. And it doesn't need to take even 10 seconds or 15 seconds or half a minute. Just take a deep breath, remember your mantra, and then get back to work again. But that would be a way somehow to prolong the benefit of meditation even during the time when we are not ostensibly sitting and meditating. And the idea is eventually to have that kind of a protective covering, so to speak, throughout the day. And that's what is meant by saying it must be destroyed by the wise disciple by remaining identified with the other, by remaining identified. Not just experiencing that identity for a short time, but remaining identified. That's the idea. So we'll stop here today. If you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, feel free to ask.
Swamiji, it's a little bit of confusing today. I felt that you said that I never born is just a delusion. But in the same time, I have millions life of experience of other than Atman. How both can be true or everything is delusion?
Say that first part again.
I never born. So how could it, I never born, but I have millions and trillions life of experience of other than Atman. I don't know what I born last life or that. So how could I have those experience when I never born?
Correct. That's true. I was never born really. Was I born unreally? And you can say yes. It's a little bit like if in my dream I go to Hawaii, I see a lot of things in Hawaii, but I've never been to Hawaii. I am just lying down in my bed. So even without having gone to Hawaii, I'm seeing things in Hawaii. Am I seeing it really? No. Unreally? I don't know whether that's the correct usage, but not really? Yes. So even when we experience the world, the experience of the world itself is not a problem. The problem is seeing what we experience as real. Because when we go to a movie, we experience the story in the movie, but we are not as affected by it as we are affected by what's happening in the world. Because ultimately we know a movie is only a movie. It's not real. So just as we are able to, even though we may be able to, we may identify with certain characters in movies, we still know that it's not really real. Our own identity is never forgotten. In the same way, even when I'm seeing this 3D movie of the world, I may get identified occasionally with things around me, but I can always remember I am the Atman watching this 3D movie. Sometimes I may forget, but I need to come back and say, I am the Atman with some Atman popcorns in my hand watching this 3D movie. And so watching the movie is not a problem. The problem is only forgetting that I am watching it. The problem is thinking I'm actually there, while really all the time I'm only dreaming about it. That's the idea. Okay? Yeah.
Swamiji, in both these verses, 267 and 268, we talked about identification with the Atman, continually identified with the Atman and then remaining identified with the Atman. So Swamiji, the concept of identification and identity is more, it's of higher conviction than just intellectually, right? You believe it truly. I don't have to remind myself, as you say, that I'm a human being, right? It's being identified as a human being. So when this book is saying continually identified with the Atman, remaining identified with the Atman, can we substitute the word remind myself? Because reminding is more of an intellectual thing, right? Not so much.
Essentially, that's what you're doing. I mean, that's the practical part is that. So remaining identified means reminding yourself, and that can take both. It has a positive aspect to it and negative aspect to it. Yeah, the positive aspect is reminding myself I am the Atman. The negative aspect is I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the ego. That Nirvana Shatkam, Mano Buddhi Ahankara Chittani Naham. So that's the negative part. What I am not and who I am. And both the ways are very effective. Yeah, it's like that. I mean, it's a little bit like also, if I'm an actor and if I'm playing a certain character, then the more I get immersed in that character, I'm expected to forget my identity while I'm doing that role. And then I become a good actor, because then we say, oh, this acting is so natural, people feel. But if someone is not able to forget their true identity while acting, then you say, oh no, this person doesn't know how to act. This person... So, our problem is, we have all become very good actors. Everyone should get an Academy Award. As far like we think, I'm a human being, I am this, I am that. Perfectly, we have immersed ourselves in that role so fully, we have forgotten who we are. Now in Vedanta, it's just the opposite. We have to become bad actors. So bad that we never forget that we are the Atman. We are in a human body. We are trying to move about and do things as human beings do, but we should never forget that we are the Atman. In which case, in the eyes of some people, our humanness may be awkward or may not be seen as normal. And you see in the lives of many saints and mystics, Ramakrishna himself, how people thought, he is crazy. Not everyone thought like that, but many did, who didn't understand. Because he could never forget that he is a child of the Divine Mother. And therefore, he didn't externally do everything the way other priests did. Yeah, that's the tricky part in life. Is sometimes we kind of live in a conformistic culture that, oh, let me do what everyone's doing. Let me not kind of do, otherwise people will think I'm an odd duck or something like that. And so the kind of environment in which most people live is like, for everyone, this is what the way people do things, this is how people think, this is what people do. And so we don't want to do something very different. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you think you're the Atman, you're definitely going to be some oddball in the crowd or anything like that. It's possible to be this completely immersed in one divine identity, and yet everyone else has no idea how you see yourself. Everyone else thinks you're just like a normal Joe. Yeah, that's essentially it. So the inner thing has to change. And the truth is that when the inner changes, the external will change on its own. When the light of the Atman shines forth fully, it cannot be hidden. Even if you try to hide it, you won't fully succeed. It will manifest itself somehow. So we don't have to try to show anyone how spiritual we are. But that's always very hollow. That's very hypocritical. We don't have to show. Why don't we just be spiritual? If I am spiritual, then the spirituality will come out, whether I like it or not, whether I want it or not. And so the more we focus on being what we want to be, we will save a lot of energy, because so much of our time and energy goes in trying to appear to others of how we want them to take us to be. And that's a lot of hard work. This is how people want me to be, so I must become like that. On the other hand, I say, let me actually be the kind of an ideal person I want to be. And then it will automatically come. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Pranam Swamiji. Swamiji, whenever we do meditation or try to practice spirituality to whatever extent that's possible, sometimes we experience this problem, not always. Times we experience this problem where we'll find it difficult to balance being a bit dormant versus a bit dormant, being a little bit inactive or not actively participating in things around, versus being active, but at the same time not forgetting the identity that you said that we have to keep reminding ourselves of. So how do we maintain that balance? We have this problem.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a decision everyone has to make on their own. Because, the word balance, I don't know in which sense you're using it, but it could also mean I would like to have a little bit of this, but I don't want to lose the other thing. That's the question that's where balance comes in. How much should I push myself in one direction without upsetting the other side? And that's a personal decision everyone has to make. Yes, eventually what we will find is that spiritual life may seem at times something that is upsetting my normal life. It shouldn't really, but it may seem sometimes to affect one's normal life. And so sometimes people are afraid to kind of push themselves beyond a certain level. And that's everyone's personal decision, how much they want to push themselves. What we do see in the lives of great saints and mystics is that when spirituality fills one's being, life will change. Of course it will change. It's not like everything is going to remain same and this also. It's not. Life is going to change, but it will change for the better. It'll be even better than how it is now. Not only for oneself, but for even people around us. But it will be different. It will be different from how it is now. And then sometimes people are afraid of change. We are familiar with our present experience in life. A status quo is something, even though it may not be perfect, at least it's familiar. And to kind of venture into an unfamiliar territory, which is really what spiritual life is, you kind of uncharted territory. You're looking into the cave of the heart. You don't know what you're going to see there. And you don't know how it is going to change you. And that's why the spiritual seeker is often referred to in these texts as Dhira, the brave one, the courageous one. That's where faith also comes in, that how strongly do I feel that this is something important? Because it's true, that's the reality. But again, that's the kind of viveka, discernment, which is really what this book is about. That has to go in our own hearts. So I understand what you're saying, but again, that's something that everyone has to wrestle with in their own lives. So we'll stop here today, and then when we meet next week, we will begin with verse 269. Right? Yes. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. On Sunday, we will have the worship of Holy Mother. Her birthday, according to the lunar calendar, falls tomorrow, and we'll celebrate it on Sunday. It'll be an online puja, so all of you can watch it from home. And as I've said on earlier occasions, if you want to participate in that puja in a better way, it will be helpful to keep a few flowers by your side. If you would like to cook something for offering, you can do that as well. And then when the right time comes for flower offering and for food offering, I'll tell you the appropriate mantras to chant, and you can make that offering at home in your own shrine. So no program in person on Sunday. This Saturday we will not have meditation because of preparations for the puja. So next time we will meet is next Wednesday. And next Wednesday will be the last class before we close for the winter recess. So we'll have one more class. So 7 days more you have a chance to remain identified with the Atman. And then we will see. Maybe you may not need the next class if you're already enlightened by then. So let's conclude with a prayer. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.